The trade-off should never be cost effectiveness.
It should never be experience, right? The trade-off should never be bad experience for the
on the 1 yard line. On the
client.
1 yard line,
Mm-hmm.
we are not looking for a 10% cost savings.
Right.
For what that should never be the rationalization. You should never compromise for a 10% cost savings.
Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, teaching you how to promote, market, and make fat stacks for your legal practice. Here on Legal Talk Network.
Welcome to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing. I'm Guy from Attorney Sync, and I won my first World Cup pool.
Wow, you won your. Does that mean I have to buy you tickets to the Mockingbird Attorney Sync Lunch Hour Legal Marketing Extravaganza this coming week?
Well, it's very interesting because per the terms of the contest, employees of Lunch Hour Legal Marketing are not available. And so I started to reflect on,
are you an employee? Do you draw a salary from Legal Talk Network?
I don't get a salary, so
you holding out on me?
I don't know what my relationship is there, but I'm not going to ask you to pay my ticket.
All right. Well, maybe I'll buy
half
you
my ticket. Half my ticket.
Half your ticket. And I'm Conrad from Mockingbird, and I believe that everyone should splurge and buy expensive pasta.
Ooh. Did you just buy some expensive pasta?
I always buy expensive pasta, and here's why. You can buy the highest end pasta and still only spend like $2 more than buying like off the rack Barilla garbage pasta, and it makes your meal that much better. The bang for your pasta dollar goes so far when you're splurging on expensive pasta.
This episode not brought to you by Barilla. And in addition to pasta and my victory lap, what else are we talking about on this episode of Lunch Hour Legal Marketing?
So, Guy, you and I get together every Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern and 10 o'clock Pacific. We host office hours, and we answer any question that you might send our way. Sometimes we comb message boards for questions. Sometimes we make stuff up. Sometimes I ask you a question, but it is really Q&A based. And we have found that most of our shows that are the best at Lunch Hour Legal Marketing are those in which we answer questions. So without any further ado, 3 excerpts from our most recent 3 episodes of Office Hours.
We are going to pander to Lawmatics.
And is Lawmatics a sponsor, Guy?
Lawmatics is a sponsor, and so
are you an investor, Guy?
I'm an investor, and I would like to alert the FTC and everybody paying attention that we have disclosed that relationship. This is from July 9th. Lawmatics unveils Merlin, a suite of AI features designed to help law firms grow. As we mentioned, Lawmatics is a sponsor. I am an investor and advisor, and I had an opportunity. Matt Spiegel showed some demos before this launch, and I was like, this is pretty freaking cool. Let's go into a couple of the specific things that they talk about here. Copilot, conversational user interface that creates automations, generates reports, and surfaces insights from firm data through plain language prompts. That sounds good, right? Okay. You can query, again, it's querying your firm data right in platform. Merlin Qualify, AI agent that evaluates and prioritizes incoming leads based on fit, urgency, and engagement signals, defined by the firm.
That's not new from Lawmatics, right?
That's right. I mean, they just said released earlier this year. Earlier this year, Merlin Qualify has been recognized with an Excellence in AI award from Business Intelligence Group. So that's not new, but I think it's part of I think it's more part of their like Merlin ecosystem now. It's not
okay, but so let me stick on this for a moment.
Yeah.
This is a absolute no-brainer use of AI.
Right.
Qualification of leads and
sentiment analysis in general, I mean, sentiment analysis from intake all the way through client representation. This is a very powerful use case for AI.
Very powerful. If you think about the value of identifying the best opportunities and having a different workflow to respond to those best opportunities, no brainer at improving how your firm does. Secondly, if you have an automated way of understanding that we don't have enough information at this point in time to evaluate whether or not this is a good lead or a bad lead, that can spur you on to actually get that information, of which Lawmatics does both. Again, we're pandering grossly here, but like both of those things, regardless of the platform, whether it's Lawmatics or something else, both of those things are obvious, valuable, automatable uses of your data, specifically through AI.
All right. In Merlin Engage, the agentic AI for dynamically engaging with prospects through SMS, email, website, chat, and phone calls. They've listed currently in beta, but essentially, agentic AI engaging via communication platforms like text, email, website, chat. What are your thoughts?
Well, let's get deeper into this. So this is basically an automated follow-up sequence through agentic AI, correct? That's what I'm understanding.
Well, that you're contextualizing it as a follow-up sequence. You know, presumably people will use this as a frontline intake tool. Let's start there, right? Let's start with a frontline intake tool. Someone comes to lands on your website, agentic AI talking on behalf of the firm.
So, you know, I lean on another one of our sponsors, Ted DeBettencourt, and I would tend to, this to me, Guy, is one of those things where I would like to watch others bleed before I bleed myself.
Totally.
And here's why. You've done all of this work. This is where the biggest mistakes happen. You know, you ask people generically in the marketing world, what would they fix in their digital marketing? And to the T, anyone who knows what the fuck they're talking about says, I would fix intake. And so this is putting AI on the 1 yard line to put the ball in the end zone at the end of the game. And you better have nailed it to make this work. I would not want to, and by the way, pandering to Matt Spiegel and Lawmatics all along, this is one of those places where I want to see other people bleed before that, before I jump all the way in here. And I'll go back to Ted DeBettencourt, who uses human-based chat, not AI chat, not, you know, we're going to save some money here on our chatbot. We're going to have the most expensive chatbot, but it's going to be really, really effective, which in fact makes it the least expensive chatbot out there. And I think that's the way I would look at this at the very end of the system. Is this foolproof? I don't know. Are there ways to improve this? I don't know. But there is. I would again. We talk about the difference internally between cutting edge and bleeding edge. Great to be on the cutting edge. This is not a place where I want to be on the bleeding edge.
Yeah, I think for me, I largely agree. I think there were a couple of things that you said that I would say that you questioned, is it foolproof? It's absolutely not foolproof. Neither are human beings, though. And so, you know, the thing that I always approach this through the trade-offs lens, right? So like, and you and I were actually, even though they're not a sponsor, we were on the Answering Legal podcast talking to our friends over there. And, you know, they put it to us, you know, what is the ideal intake setup? And my answer was a lawyer trained in intake with a high level of empathy, who can answer, who can scale, you know, maybe multiple, if you're doing scale, they can answer the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And of course, everyone rolls their eyes and laughs. That's not realistic, but that's the best experience from a consumer standpoint. The other end of the spectrum, we laughed about this one too, is historically we've laughed that it was voicemail, but you know, it could be a human intake person who answers the phone, law firm.
Having a bad day.
So,
I mean, it's a negative. It's not even a neutral.
It's a negative experience. It's a liability. And so then you got all the mess in between. And so I'm always encouraging folks. I'm like, look, it depends. People hate that, but it does depend on which trade-offs you're willing to accept. I think if you're in personal injury and you're doing front lines, you have a very short time. If you're gonna put on the front line any kind of technology thing, you need to be able to filter certain intakes to escalate them to human beings, to lawyers, as a priority, or you're going to lose out. Now, some people will say, I'm just going to accept that. I'm going to accept that I'm going to lose out on some of those clients, and that I'm okay with that because of the efficiencies gained by the technology mostly solution. But there's consequences.
This is where I would take exception.
Okay.
You talked about the trade-offs. The trade-off should never be cost effectiveness.
It should never be experience, right? The trade-off should never be bad experience for the
on the 1 yard line. On the 1 yard line,
mm-hmm.
we are not looking for a 10% cost savings.
Right.
For what that should never be the rationalization. You should never compromise for a 10% cost savings.
Yeah. And so then you're like, okay, so you're like, look, what are the contexts that we think makes more sense? Certainly as you mentioned, on the chase, on the follow-up and the nurture, that's a no-brainer, right? You've already established the rapport. You've already started to build a relationship. You can set expectations because you've already had that rapport. You can set expectations like, hey, part of our system is going to be this, chat bot. If you ever are having a bad experience, we want to hear from you. You can still feel free to reach out to a human being, but set those expectations, be transparent about it. And again, I think you find that it's continually getting better in more contexts every day.
And an interesting conversation the other day with someone, and I actually think it's on an earlier pod. Go back 3 or 4 pods from today, about kind of this lead scoring concept, really big cases, and the importance of not having an aggressive automated follow-up sequence, because that's the best way to lose them. And they were actually talking about the importance of dialing back follow-up for those really, this is specifically in the PI world, but the analogy probably holds. Being much less aggressive for the larger value matters, which I thought was counterintuitive to me. I think this is Kerry Kobe White who said this.
You're using the term aggressiveness. You're talking about frequency of follow-up and like number of times and that kind of stuff. When you say aggressiveness, you're obviously not talking about messaging, right?
Multi-channel, right? Like, yeah. We're going to call you, we're going to text you, we're going to email you, we're going to advertise the crap out of
yeah.
It was an interesting conversation. Go ahead.
Well, this goes back to the root of the issue, and is mentioned in the comments too. On the big cases, you got to get human on the phone quickly. Like, I agree. The issue is, when do you figure out it's this big case, or when do you figure out it's this type of case that needs a different workflow? And that's the trick, right?
Well, watch me pander to Lawmatics again. This is the value of lead scoring. Again, I think this is one of the most obvious underutilized cases for AI. But
again, so let's talk about your example. In the example you're talking about, are you presuming that a human being was the first touch point, or Lawmatics is the first touch point?
I'm not presuming anything.
That matters though. That matters. It matters because
but in a perfect world, whether it's a human or it's a form fill or it's a chat bot, Lawmatics can look at that input data and say, this is a really great opportunity for us, or it's a garbage opportunity, or we don't know, right? Regardless of what that first contact is, right?
Well, I think that's the challenge, though. The challenge is because if you're interfacing with technology on the front end, there's a certain number of those clients that you might lose just for the fact that they were engaged with by a bot. Regardless of whether Lawmatics figures it out or not.
This is Ted Betancourt's argument.
It's part of it. I mean, again, I'm just recognizing that there's trade-offs. I think the technology is amazing. I've seen it, and we talked to the Haskins brothers too. I know that you're familiar with their Speed AI product.
Yep.
You see, I mean, the reason Speed AI exists is because of this issue, right?
Yep.
It's because it's misunderstood intake data,
so let's
dropped intake balls.
Yep. Let's explain. Can you quickly explain what Speed AI does and why we're using this example? And then I will tell you my
Speed AI does what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Speed AI does so it's doing it instead of it's doing it after the fact, right? So like the intake, regardless of whether the intake was completed by in-person receptionist, a virtual receptionist, a human being, technology, whomever, or Ted the Betancourt, whomever. Speed AI analyzes the intake data, essentially the call transcript, and I believe you can check me on this if it's wrong, but in the system, say the intake person marks it as like no case, it'll review that for whether or not it believes there actually might be a case worth following back up with.
Yeah, and it'll alert you and say, "Hey,
right,
dumbass,
hey,
go call Mary because you guys dropped the ball." And let's go try and save this thing.
And again, here's the one that this happens. People don't believe me that I might tell you this, but I see it. People, regardless of whether it's an in-house receptionist, a virtual receptionist, or technology, you'll see someone will contact the firm, qualified case, and the intake person says there's no case. We don't do that. We don't service that kind of case. That's not our type of client. And if the law firm owner saw that, they pulled they're like, this is terrible. Terrible.
By the way, you guys think this doesn't happen a lot,
right? They don't think it happens.
I'm glad that you were sharing this because this happens all the time.
All the time.
All the time. And I don't mean to besmirch the third-party vendors, but it is worse. And I cannot prove this from a data perspective. I can only tell you anecdotally, it is worse when you have a third-party answering service.
It varies. Okay? It varies by service, and it even varies within the service based on the reps that you get. And obviously, you're comparing that against what you're paying for an internal person. On average, like maybe you're right, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of bad in-house intake going on.
100%. But like this happens a lot, and I will tell you, yes, automate the process of trying to figure this out. So with Speed AI specifically, there are a bunch of other services at this point in time that are doing this, right? So there's a lot of sentiment analysis that happens. There's a lot of stuff going on with the analysis of intake calls to try and do this as well. So Speed AI was on it quickly. They made vaporware to start out with, and then they actually backed it up with something that was interesting. And now I think a lot of other software has caught up to that. However, the concept of being able to understand that we're missing the boat on some of our intakes, and I still believe this. The job of the COO or the director of intake, or there has to be someone whose job it is, and ideally using technology to make this better, but someone whose job it is to manage the personal intake people to minimize these drops. That has to be a part of your business.
Yeah. Don't take our word for it. Take it from real law firm owner. Conrad, you've never screwed up a calendar invite.
Not today.
Well, we've got a real life lesson about a real calendar mix-up from Alps Insurance Claims Files. We are so grateful to have Rio Lane here to tell us a horror story about a small misstep that has a big consequence. Today, we're talking safety nets. Sometimes they're not.
Yeah, looks can be deceiving. And here's a story that should really make you rethink, or at the very least, question your backup calendar. So Lisa was a litigation attorney at a mid-sized firm in California. She felt secure because the firm used a strict 3-calendar system to track deadlines. Plenty of redundancy, or so it seemed. So what Lisa didn't know was that every deadline flowed from the same original data entry. So things worked fine until they didn't. A single California deadline was miscalculated based on a bad assumption about a court holiday. You know, these things happen. But that bad date was then copied into every system. No redundancy, just repetition. When Lisa's motion was filed late, no one could explain how all 3 calendars agreed and all 3 were wrong.
So here's the takeaway. Never take your calendaring system at its word. True redundancy means independent verification. If every calendar pulls from the same source, that's a misstep. Learn how to avoid those at alpsinsurance.com. Okay.
Anyway, so as many of you super fans know, Lunch Hour Legal Marketing does have a Slack channel. If you're not in the Slack channel, reach out and we will get you added to the Slack channel. But the reason I bring this up is because our good friend Tim from Iowa, aka Tim Semlroth, posted a question.
Okay,
here we go. We filmed each of our lawyers, so 17 different lawyers, answering the same 5 common questions personal injury prospects have. Each answer is approximately a minute long. We did this so we could feature them on each attorney bio page of the new website. They turned out really well, and I was pleasantly surprised to see how each attorney answered the same question in their own voice in a slightly different way. In reviewing them, I realized that these FAQ videos have the potential to be extremely useful if AI starts digesting them. Any suggestions for how we should deploy them on our YouTube channel so we get the most bang for the buck? So framing, we got lawyer videos, their FAQ style. And, you know, when I first read this, to be honest with you, I was thinking about this post from long ago on the Moz blog. I think it was by some of the Wistia folks, but they were talking about some of the considerations in like video hosting and whether you host on YouTube or you host natively on your site and SEO and all the historical things that go into that. This is similar to that. But I'm going to, because the question is like, because he's very specific, how we should deploy them on the YouTube channel. So he's not talking about deploying anywhere else except for YouTube, which we can maybe.
That's my first question.
Right. So maybe that's the second thing we can talk about is let's answer his question directly, and then let's talk about if there are things beyond just YouTube that he should be thinking about. But he's talking about his YouTube channel. And then he's talking about bang for his buck, and it sounds like it's in the context of AI. Now, the first thing that I'll say is this. YouTube, owned by Google. It's very clear from all the Google I.O. stuff and even what we're just seeing anecdotally and what all the platforms are publishing in terms of research. Google's AI loves YouTube. Right. And probably one of the reasons that Tim is thinking, I want to get maximum bang for my buck from posting on YouTube in the context of AI. The more, you know, kind of here's the 101 answer. The 101 answer is to make sure that you're titling, you're filling out a description, you make sure that the captions are correct, whether you're auto-generating captions or uploading captions, make sure the captions are correct. But other than that, other than the basic blocking and tackling on the channel from an AI perspective, the AI kind of handles the rest, in my opinion. You just got to make sure you've got, you know, if you put the wrong transcript in there, you might have problems, right? So it's like you mention the name wrong or you say something that's factually untrue. That could be an issue. Or the caption, the closed caption transcript doesn't match what's actually being said. That could be an issue, but getting that right, getting the title, getting some tagging, getting the description filled out there. I think those are kind of the basics that I would start with. But, you know, Google's ingesting YouTube content. There's not much more to do there with a published video, because we're not talking about video content strategy. We're talking about videos that have already been created. What do you got?
Well, a couple of things. I was scribbling talking points while you were talking and looking for stuff on the interwebs.
Sure. Yeah, great.
Number one, biggest bang for your buck does not limit yourself to a single channel, especially when you're creating content. And so definitionally in his question, he's limiting his biggest bang for the buck by talking specifically about YouTube. So I think that is one really, really important thing to note. So that's a piece of this. The other thing that I would do, and there was an interesting post or email or something I read in the last 48 hours from Darren Shaw that made me think about pricing information. And then it made me think about what is I'm going to get to a point here in a moment. So just bear with me. What is the content that AI wants to know about you? That Google, specifically Google AI, wants to know about you? What do they want to know? And how can I get that stuff? How can I get that content everywhere that I possibly can? And so they actually tell you, and that's why I was kind of half listening to you, searching for this. This is direct from Google, and this is when they announced that they were listening in on LSA calls, and they're telling you what they're listening for and how they are going to use it. So I'm going to read this to you. Because it's important. New provisions allowing Google to select, modify, display, and use rich content, including but not limited to photos, provider bios, service descriptions, special offerings, pricing information, and discounts. Okay, I highlighted provider bios and pricing information. They're telling you what they're listening for. And we talked about the 5, and this is not going to help Tim because this is,
I was going to say, none of this helps Tim.
This does not help Tim, but if your name is not Tim and you're not in Iowa, this might be helpful for you.
Yeah.
They want to know more about the provider bios. And one of the hardest things for some lawyers to do, I'll even say most lawyers to do, is to talk about themselves in a superlative fashion. Now, there are some painfully annoying people who can't help that, whether they have a JD or not. But it's a really awkward thing to talk through your provider bio, who you are, my LinkedIn, my resume. I don't want to be on film. I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, my 3.9 GPA at the University of Michigan Business School, and then I ran the Silver Star for being an amazing digital marketer from marketerdigital.com, right? Like, you don't want to say that stuff and having that as a one way. It feels to me there is room in Feed the AI, right? We talked about Feed the Machine at the Lunch Hour Legal Marketing Summit that is coming up on August 11 through 13. Get your tickets now because we have almost sold out the room. But we did a Feed the Machine at the last one, and feeding the machine your provider by, how do you do that with video? I think having a two-way conversation with an interviewer that talks about why you I'm just going back into Tim's office. Tim and each of these 17 attorneys talking about why they became a lawyer, but doing that with the deliberate context of feeding the machine the provider bio information.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 100% agree with you on all that. I'm trying to, I think that's good stuff. Really trying to think about like meeting Tim where he is. He's got these videos. I think the other thing that I would be thinking about, and I haven't seen the videos, and I pulled up the YouTube page, so we have some context here. I would be chopping, assuming the videos are like more raw kind of bio, longer FAQs, I would chop them into shorts.
Well, he said they're a minute each. So they're already short.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
They're already
short.
Well, I might even cut some 30-second ones
on YouTube. And would you post YouTube that as a regular?
Short. I know, as a short.
Yeah, okay.
Let's see if we got any shorts here.
I'm telling you, the shorts get more display.
They do, because no one wants to watch. Great. Now, so this is really, again, I'm gonna do what I was trying not to do, which is to go and give advice and guidance that's not going to help Tim, but will help the next person. Which is, YouTube has its own. Any YouTube expert will tell you YouTube has all of its own sorts of like things that you can do to your videos to improve their performance on YouTube. I mean, you can go look this up. Thumbnails are obviously extremely important. There's all sorts of different things that go into this, which I'm not going to go deep on all that because it's accessible to anybody who wants to just like learn about YouTube creation. But I think that's a piece that missing. And frankly, Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, our process on this, like, I feel like we talk about this actually in our show prep, is being more intentional about designing content that is specific for YouTube. And this is the trade-off, right? So just for context for people, because I know a lot of people are dealing with the same thing. So we Lunch Hour Legal Marketing was a podcast. We started filming it, so we have video of it. And then we take clips, we make social clips out of the video content. But we don't actually mindfully do the like YouTube stuff. For example, instead of just like taking a clip, you might be like 3 things about RSH legal that are, unique or something like that. It's designed for the social, consumer, the social media consumer, especially platform specific. That's what I think is the missing piece for a lot of the stuff that I see on YouTube. Because we always come prepared with some questions that we've seen in other contexts. Today's question that I'm going to ask you, Conrad, is actually, this is a timeless one. How do I get more online reviews? We're talking about online reviews. We talked about how Top Dogs generate all these reviews. I'm a client. And you know what? Let's do this 3 different ways. Let's do this 3 ways. Let's do the I'm brand new. I've just set up my Google business profile. Talk to me about how to get online reviews. Then talk to me about like if I've got scale, I've got machine behind me, I've got infrastructure, I've got marketing budget, I've got intake, I've got staff. I'm a heavy marketer. What kind of ideas do you have to get more online reviews for that segment as well?
You said 3, that was 2.
And then you can come up with your own third.
Okay, so a couple things. The brand new firm. I think it's very important to get an understanding of what you need and what you're going to do with your reviews. And I think you need to very simplistically break this into 2 components. Number 1, are you going to be able to compete in local search for it, period, end of sentence. And by that, I mean, if you look at the firms that are within the addressable market who are proximal to your office, can you catch up to those guys? And if the answer is no, your objective with reviews is not to generate business from Google Local, because you're never going to fucking catch up. Okay. So you first need to answer that question. And if that's the case, it's like, oh, okay, fine, Conrad, like reviews don't matter then. That is not true. The second objective, which may actually be more important, and it depends on what game you can play. But your second objective is to answer the vetting question. I was just referred to Guy Law Firm, and I want to learn a little bit about them. And if I go on Google and there are 6 reviews, I'm not really going to learn enough about them. If I go to ChatGPT and Guy has no reviews on Yelp, which is now being heavily featured in ChatGPT, I don't know anything more about them. So I think you need to break this into a vetting versus new business conversation in your head. And most people fail to do this because most of you fallaciously believe that you can compete. And most of you can't, given where your office currently is. Sorry, don't shoot the messenger. And then your next question was scale. So this is actually my answer to both of these profiles. The answer is volume. And that's why it's so hard for the new solo to actually play in the game of acquisition. But you really need to recognize that the primary success, whether I like it or not, the primary success in the review game is having a shitload of volume and a process to turn that volume into reviews. And so, which is really massively unfair to small solos. It's massively unfair to anyone who's opening up an office. But that is a fact. And so when I think about volume, the the cousin on volume is it's not just necessarily volume of business that you do. It is the volume of people that your firm interacts with outside of I hired this lawyer, because by Google's guidelines, people who interact with your firm can leave a review about your firm. That doesn't necessarily mean that they retained you for a brain injury matter. It means that they interacted with your firm. And so expand your vision or your definition of where those reviews can come from in order to expand the denominator of volume.
That's right. I mean, that's what I really, the tactical takeaway here is most firms think reviews come from happy clients singing your praises. And so they get into things like, all right, I got to create my system and process to ask for reviews after I hand the client a check or something positive happens. And like, that is definitely one part of the review game that you should be thinking about. But to Conrad's point, you've got to get creative. I mean, let's face it. It is especially in PI, but really in most major direct-to-consumer practice areas, in any kind of reasonably sized market, it's going to be competitive. I mean, you're going to be in hundreds of reviews land, if not thousands of reviews land. And so how do you do that? Well, if you're a smaller firm, you're just getting started, you're not going to have hundreds and thousands of clients to be able to leave your reviews. And so you've got to start thinking, what can I do to motivate somebody to leave me a review? So it still comes down to experiences, right? Because that's the guideline, right? It's anybody who's had experience with your firm. So let's talk experience. Intake experience. We were just talking about this earlier, but even if it's a turn down, if you find a way, maybe you have more time on your hands because you have less clients. And so going the extra mile to really help someone find the help that they need, even if it isn't you, is a way to motivate a review. Speaking, right? If you're doing educational content, or you're doing seminars or webinars or in-person events, don't forget to include, like, if you enjoyed this session or if you found this session helpful, go leave a review. I've heard lawyers even get more creative than that. Some lawyers that they partner with a local business. Maybe they host something at the local pizza shop, whether it's a focus group or whether it's like informational content about we do a lot of personal injury stuff. So it's, we're very focused on accident prevention and safety tips and that kind of stuff. And then have folks at the in-person event, make it very frictionless for them to leave a review. Now, people will say this is crossing the line against Google's guidelines. And, we've talked about kiosks, and there are specific guidelines that you want to pay attention to. But at the end of the day, in most of the competitive landscapes, you have to get beyond thinking that I'm just going to have, happy clients at the end of the representation, go leave me a review, because you're just not going to compete.
Not going to compete. Yeah.
Yep.
What else?
I think the other thing that's interesting, we talked about, you mentioned the Yelp deal with ChatGPT. How are you talking to clients about diversifying review profiles on other sites? Historically, I'll just say what we used to do. We used to be like, look, if you don't have a competitive number of reviews on Google, just focus there. But to your point now, as AI, like, are you more diversifying, or are you still mostly Google?
100%. So this all lives in the context of competitiveness. So one of the things that you could choose to do, you could lose the Google game and win the Yelp game with your 80 reviews. That's great strategy, right? Like we just talked about how it's so hard for the solo firm. Fine. Get all of your reviews on Yelp. Now, Yelp sucks because it's really difficult to get reviews published.
You can't even ask. You can't even ask.
You can't like they're
Facebook.
What's that guy's name? Jeremy. I can't remember his last name, but like has some like asinine perspective about how it's unethical to ask for reviews, and so like Yelp has this whole utterly stupid policy about asking for reviews and getting reviews on Yelp. But I'm using this as an example. Go win a thing that you can win. Right? Don't try and win the Google game if you're never going to win that, but take your 80 reviews and put them somewhere where you can actually win. I think that's really good strategy. There's also, and I think this is increasingly real. We used to, back in the day, Guy, we used to have this multi-channel approach. I used to encourage lawyers to get their reviews written on Avvo, right? And then
why would you do that?
Because it was delightfully self-serving for Avvo. But like people were showing up on Avvo and using Avvo reviews, right? There were more lawyer reviews on Avvo than there were on Google, right? So like Google Business Profile wasn't a thing back in the day. Like that's a relatively new, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's a relatively new addition to Google. This whole profile about a business living within Google search results. That's I don't know the answer to this. It's less than like 8 years old, I think.
Well, they were like, I want to say like Rich Parton's eating our lunch over here. We should just flip a switch and put reviews on Google. And so
that's what happened. And by the way, right after when that became a thing, guess who dropped out of the game? Avvo sold to internet brands. Like don't tell me those two things are not closely related. I by the way, I have no knowledge that they were. But it doesn't, there's a great Australianism. Blind Freddy could see that. So anyway, where was I going with that?
I don't know.
Win where you can win. Be strategic about where you put your reviews. Increasingly, we went from a place where there's reviews everywhere to how do we get the reviews everywhere to show up on Google? Right. And now we've going back to the reviews everywhere perspective because of the importance of this be everywhere model. And we talked about this the other day. We could do a segment on this. The abandonment of the hub and spoke model. The hub and spoke model had your website at the center, and the goal was to have everything else supporting getting traffic to your website. That is gone. And that also held true in the review game. The objective was to get people to your site.